Brittany, and if you're already subscribed to my channel, welcome back. If you just found my channel for the first time, before we go any further, before you get any of this juiciness that I have for you today, go ahead and make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Also, make sure that you hit that notification bell so that you get notified as soon as I post new content. And while you're down there in that little area down there, you may as well just go ahead and like the video. You're gonna like it anyway, so just do it now. Save yourself some time, some stress, so you can pay attention. So for today's installment of Makeup and Murder, we'll be covering the murder of Jessica Chambers. So I am a huge fan of investigation discovery, which I'm sure many of you are as well, if you're watching this especially. So they recently came out with a documentary or a special about the Jessica Chambers murder and the cases that followed thereafter. And yes, I said cases. And I thought it would be a good idea to just cover that for those of you who have not caught it, and give you some background and a little bit about the story and also the trials. So let's jump right into the story. So Jessica Chambers was born in 1995, February 2nd of 1995. And she was born to her mother, who was a nurse, and then her father, who was the mechanic or a mechanic for the sheriff's department in their town. Now, Jessica's mom and dad separated by the time she was 3 years old, but it was like an amicable split. So she stayed very close with both parents. The family stayed close as a unit together, which I think is awesome, which should happen more often, but we have bitter people in this world, bitter baby mamas, bitter baby daddies. Don't let me sound like I got it twisted, because I know. But they stayed together as a family, making sure that all the siblings stayed together thereafter. She ended up with 5 siblings, and pretty big family, but they were all super close. So during her childhood, her school days, Jessica was a cheerleader. She also played softball. So when you saw her, she was like this pretty blonde girl that, you know, you would expect to be a cheerleader, but she was also into sports, and I think that is more power to her. Now, growing up for Jessica was not always, you know, roses. Her dad actually got arrested for manufacturing methamphetamines. So he went to prison, and in prison is when he got his life together. He started working on a program within the prison where they would work on cars for the sheriff's department, and that's how he kind of ended up establishing his career outside of prison. Once he got out of prison, he did such a good job that the sheriff's department hired him as a mechanic. Also in 2012, her brother Alan was killed in a car accident. So, I mean, life really wasn't the easiest for her, obviously, and it did lead her down kind of a path, not a horrible path, but a path where she kind of experimented with drugs. She didn't hang out with the best crowd, but she still managed to be a pretty good student in school. So she graduated high school and she started making plans, you know, to go to college. During that time, she had also come to the conclusion that, hey, she wanted to be a writer. So awesome for her. She graduated high school. She's trying to make a plan for her life. She's figured out the path that she wants to take. So it just sounded like she was really trying to get a hold of, you know, her life, despite the past or her past not being the best, her upbringing in terms of traumatic events that happened and her father being in prison for a period of time. She really tried to make the best of her life. And quite honestly, there's not a ton of more background to provide for Jessica because she was so young when she was murdered. So, I mean, that's really the background story for her. So let's get right into the crime. On December 6th in Cortland, Mississippi, there were 2 men who were driving and they spotted a car on fire. So these 2 guys, they see the car on fire and they went to go to check out, you know, the car to see what was happening. So they find that there's no one around the car. It's just a car and they're burning. So they call the authorities to have them come put out the fire and check out what was going on. The responsible thing to do. So once the authorities are called, first responders arrive on the scene and the fire department gets there. And the first thing they see within about 2 minutes of arriving on the scene is a woman who is stumbling. She is burned, she is naked, and she is trying to say, "Help me," is what they're saying, that she was trying to ask for help. So after this severely burned and naked woman, barely mumbles out the words, "Help me," she then collapses on the ground. So first responders ask her name, and she tells them that her name is Jessica Chambers. And they also try to ask her, who did this to you? How did this happen? Who did this to you? Trying to get any information that they can get from her before she gets taken to the hospital. And miraculously, she's still alive, so thank God for that. When they ask her, who did this to you, she says, Eric or Derek. Some of the first responders said Eric or Derek, but the majority of them said that they heard her say Eric. Now keep in mind that she is burned badly. She's burned all over her body. She is probably in shock. So I don't really know what to do with that, but she was able to tell them her name, so she had to be, some type of aware of what she was saying. But what she told them was something that either sounded like Eric or Derek. So after that, she was transported to a burn center in Memphis, which is really close to Cortland, Mississippi. And when she arrives there, doctors say that she has, second and third degree burns over 93% of her body. And it's a miracle that she's actually still alive, breathing. And they also determined that she was in that car fire for at least 3 to 5 minutes before she was able to get out of the fire. I couldn't even imagine. I could not imagine. So shortly after that she arrives at the burn center, they, try to do everything they can, any life-saving measures that they can to keep her alive, but doctors quickly determine that there's really nothing else that they can do to save her. And they let the family know that, and shortly after that, unfortunately, Jessica Chambers passed away. So hopping right into the investigation, at the scene, they find Jessica's phone. After they put out the fire, obviously, they find Jessica's phone, and they also find pieces of her bra at the scene. So that pretty much told them that this was a sexual attack in nature. So after they collected all of the evidence that they could, they sent the car to the lab, obviously, to be further processed. And while that car was processing, they also requested for the MBI, or the Mississippi Bureau of Investigations, to come in and help out with the investigation. Now, just from experience of, watching documentaries about true crime, listening to podcasts about true crime, just knowing stories about true crime in general, you feel a lot better when a small town calls in the State Bureau of Investigations to help out. I just always feel like an investigation ends up being done better and more thoroughly when they call in assistance, especially for these small towns where these crimes happen. So after Jess has passed, I'm sorry, I'm calling her Jess for short because she feels like, a little sister or something. But after Jess has passed, they take her to the medical examiner's office, and the medical examiner finds that there are splash patterns on her body. So that tells detectives, obviously, that some type of accelerant had been used in her murder. So in order to set that car on fire, and obviously they set her on fire alive, whether the suspect knew it or not, but some type of accelerant was used to start the fire, to set Jessica on fire. I cannot imagine the pain that she experienced. It's just this whole thing is just unimaginable. Like, why? And they found the accelerant that was used was gasoline. So Whoever did this doused gasoline onto her while she was still alive and set her and the car on fire. Now, during all of this, investigators are also doing their best, you know, to try to locate any Eric or Derek in the entire county. They are asking and talking to every Eric and Derek that they can find. Now, being that this is a small town in Mississippi and my whole family on my mom and dad's side is from Mississippi, so I'm very aware of the racial issues in Mississippi. I have family that lives in very rural, very rural areas in Mississippi. And I also have family that lives in more of the urban areas of Mississippi as well. But the racism doesn't change. It's a state that is still old and very stuck in its ways. So in this case, when police were, you know, questioning all of the Erics and Dereks that they could find, it just seemed that they were targeting Black Eric and Dereks. And that really caused a divide in the town and in the county, because who said it was a Black person? Who said a Black Eric or a Black Derek killed Jessica? It could have been a white Eric, a white Derek. I know more white Erics than I know Black Erics, I'll tell you that much. But that was the issue at the time. That caused such a racial divide in the town and almost hindered the investigation, because obviously these African-American men who they're just all of a sudden, and not even properly questioning them, they're going in and saying, so this victim said that you were the one that killed her. And it's just like, is that the way you do that? Is that how you approach someone who's not necessarily a suspect just because they have a name that sounded like what the victim said? But so while they are doing their investigations, there's a man who lives near the road where Jessica was found in the burning car. And he's walking his daughter in a stroller, and he comes across a set of keys, and he picks those keys up and he looks at them, and I don't know if he thought they were just suspicious or what, but he turns the keys obviously into authorities. He is familiar with the story, it's on the news and what's going on, and the guy felt like he should turn those in. He turned them into the detectives, and of course they sent those for processing as well. They also want to establish a timeline of Jess's day, the day that she was murdered. So investigators sit down and talk to her mother about that day and the events that led up to what happened to her daughter. So her mother tells detectives that earlier that morning, her and her best friend Keisha went riding around town. So then after riding around with her best friend Keisha, she comes home at around 2, she takes a nap, and then at 4:25 she gets a phone call, and then she tells her mom that she's going to run to kind of like the convenience store / gas station called M&M, and that she would be back later. So then a couple of hours later, at about a little after 6:45 or so, Lisa, who's her mom, gets another call from Jessica, and she says, you know, Mom, I'll be home soon. I'm coming home to clean up my room. I love you. Talk to you later. Bye. And that was it. That was the last time that Lisa heard from her daughter. So they go to the store, the M&M's Quick Stop store, and there's a young clerk there, and he's a young clerk of, you know, Middle Eastern or Asian descent, and he confirms that she was there, and he even mentions that they have video that the cops can review to prove that she was there and to get a time of, you know, when she was there and when she left. So the investigators, they take a look at the actual video, and they can see that she was there at about 5:20 that night. They see her get out of the car, she gets some gas, she comes into the store, and as she's in the store, she makes a phone call, and then she leaves. Now, of course, this clerk, who is the son of the person who owns the actual store, and of course, because of his nationality, what he looks like, you have, you know, people on the internet who are quick to say, it was him, he did it, of course he did it, let's go burn this place down. Like, just keyboard bullies that want to make threats and want to be ridiculous, just absolutely ridiculous. This person was completely cooperative. He was working his job. That's it, and that's all. He was more than helpful. And just because of where he's from, where his family's from, his nationality, his race, instantly he was named a suspect by the community. But of course, he was proven to have no involvement whatsoever in this case at all. So the police go to talk to Jessica's best friend, Keisha. And Keisha mentions that they went to the store, yes, and they also went to go pick up a friend or acquaintance of theirs named Quentin. And they went riding around basically and smoked a blunt, and then they dropped him off back at home. Now, Quentin had just met Jess a couple of weeks ago. Quentin does have a record. He had a record for burglary, and the police go and talk to him. He pretty much says, yeah, he was with them, and confirms Keisha's story that they went riding around and smoked a blunt after she picked him up with both Keisha and Jessica in the car, and then they dropped him back off at home. So essentially they, you know, initially dismiss him as a suspect and ask him, you know, well, do you know somebody that she knows that's named Eric or Derek? And he says, well, yeah, I know somebody named Eric or Derek. His name is Derek Holmes. So they chase down Derek Holmes, and they find out that, you know, he had recently met Jess, and he had a thing for Jessica, and he would tend to come on very, very strong to her, and it was kind of awkward, and it didn't make her feel very comfortable at all. Now, Derek had a record for exploitation of a minor, so, you know, it's not a stretch for the police to, you know, consider him a suspect. So they speak with sex offender Derek, and, you know, he had been, according to friends and Quentin, he had been, you know, repeatedly asking her for a date, and she was repeatedly turning him down. But when police asked him where he was the night and time that happened, he said he was at home rubbing his mama's feet. And at first I was like, what? Like, that's your alibi? But when he explained it, you know, my mom's a diabetic, so you have to do those things for circulation purposes, etc., for a diabetic. So it made sense that he said he was at home, as he does every night, rubbing his mom's feet. So of course they went and spoke with the mother and a couple other witnesses, and they did confirm that he was at home at the time and he was not at all involved in Jessica's murder. All right, I gotta do my lashes, y'all. So the investigators have, you know, checked her phone, and they realized that she has no Eric or Derek saved in her phone at all. But she has a unknown number saved in her phone that has some very sexual messages to it, and it just seems like the person on the other end is making tons of sexual advances, and she is rebuffing all of those advances via text message. And they try to find out whose phone number that is, whose unsaved phone number that is, and come to find out it's Quentin's phone number. Now, as they're doing this and they're analyzing, you know, phone data, etc., they also check on her most recent boyfriend, and that boyfriend is actually in prison. His name is Travis, and they realized that, you know, the relationship was volatile, but when he went to prison, he was gang affiliated. So the theory there was that he may have, you know, put a hit out on her because he heard that she was dating someone else, involved with someone else. etc. Now, they talk to him, and you know, when they talk to him, he is extremely hurt that she is hurt or passed, and he had nothing at all to do with her murder. So finally, they confront Quentin again about the messages in Jessica's phone. He said, yeah, they had sex before. It was actually a week before the crime happened. And again, he reiterates that, you know, once they dropped him off, that was it. He didn't see them after that. So he also walks them around the property where he lives, which is right across from the M&M store / gas station. And they walk into a shed, and he has a can of gasoline in his shed. So they take note of that, obviously, and then they ask him where he was at the time that the crime actually happened. So he tells them that he was not in Cortland. He was actually in Batesville to get a green dot card for his girlfriend to send money to her in Louisiana. Now, the strange thing is that when Quentin gets back home from quote unquote Batesville, he realizes, or he hears on the news, what has happened to Jessica. And of course, he does not have any normal reaction to her being set on fire and, you know, at the time, possibly not living to see the next day. But instead, he decides, you know, well, she won't be around anymore, so let me just go ahead and delete all of her messages, phone calls, any type of contact information. Let me just erase her from, you know, my phone, my life. It doesn't matter. She's not around anymore. So they go to investigate that he went to actually get this green dot card in Batesville. So they go to where he said that he got the card from, and they do find evidence that he was there. So they, again, cross him off of the suspects list. So shortly after this, police get, you know, new data information from phone pings. So they are able to check Quentin's phone pings as well as Jessica's phone pings to see if they're in the same place at the same time, what time they separated, you know, all of that good stuff, trying to figure out a timeline for where she was throughout that time and where he was. And basically, they are able to see that from the phone pings, they can see that she was in Batesville at 6 p.m. actually, and he was also in Batesville at 6 p.m. And when they confront him with that information, he says, oh yeah, I was with my friend Big Mike, and when I was in Batesville, I, you know, ran across her while I was out there, but I, you know, got back in the car with Mike and went back to Cortland, and don't know what she did after that point. So they check with Big Mike, and Big Mike says, absolutely not. He's not going for that foolishness. He says, absolutely not. He was not with me on that night. Actually, I was at a Tennessee Titans game, so there's no way that he could have been with me in all actuality. So now, once they confirm that he was not with Big Mike, now he needs to explain to them what's really going on. So at this point, Quentin is back in jail for another charge, another fraud charge this time. So they go and they talk to him and say, you know, Big Mike said you were not with him. He was at a Tennessee Titans game and you were not there with him. So where were you? Actually, we have information now that we can see that your phone was with Jessica's phone until at least 7:30. What say you? And again, he keeps claiming, you know, no, I wasn't with her, blah, blah, blah. But now at this point, they have enough evidence, or they feel that they have enough evidence to indict Quentin, and they indict him for the murder of Jessica Chambers. Now, of course, when he's indicted, there's an uproar, obviously, because a lot of people are split. They feel like maybe they just chose a black man with a record because it was the easiest thing to do, is to indict a black man with a record. And other people, you know, genuinely felt like he did it. So getting into the trial. Now, with the trial, the biggest thing, you know, that was the biggest hang up for the trial was the fact that everybody claimed that she said Eric or Derek when they asked her on the scene who did this to her. And with that, the defense was pretty much saying, well, my client's name doesn't even sound like Eric or Derek, so why are we here? The person that is named Eric or Derek should be on trial here. He's not, but why is Quentin here instead? The defense also argued that phone ping from phone towers are not always the most reliable way to get your evidence. So prosecution called her best friend Keisha to the stand, and Keisha mentioned that a few days before whatever occurred that night happened, she remembered that her and Jessica, they picked him up and they dropped him off at a place called the Sandbox. And she recalls this day specifically because as he was being dropped off, her friend Jessica got out of the car and gave him a hug before he left. And it was a bit of an awkward embrace where he was holding her really tight and it appeared that he wasn't gonna let her go. And she looked scared by that. Now, that was a week prior to what happened. And she did mention, she being Keisha, that on the night of the actual incident, there were no issues or any weirdness between Quentin and Jessica. So did it help the prosecution? Did it hurt the prosecution? Who knows? Now, prosecutors also called the very first responder that arrived at the scene, and he goes on the stand and he says that, you know, he explains the environment, the situation, and how everything felt and all of the emotions that night. And it was a very touching kind of testimony. He was also asked what he thought Jessica said that night when she was asked who did this to her. And his response was he wasn't sure. And of course, the prosecution was done with that because they thought, you know, well, that'll help our case because we have somebody saying that he could not make out what she was saying when she was laying there and was asked, who did this to you? And we have the defense follow up and say, you know, do you recall your sworn statement? And makes him read his sworn statement. And when he reads it, it's clear that he stated that he heard her say Eric or Derek at that time. And this is big because this is a big blow to the prosecution's case because they thought they had a witness. Out of all of the first responders that were there, they thought they had at least one witness to say, you know, I'm not sure what she really said that night, to be quite honest. And the prosecutors followed up by, you know, still calling everyone else that was there to the scene. But again, that didn't really help their cause because everyone said, you know, it was very chaotic. It was very loud, very emotional, bunch of stuff going on at the same time. So, you know, they can understand why she wouldn't be thinking straight in that moment when she said what she said as to who did this to her. But at the end of the day, they all still said they heard her say Eric or Derek did this to her. Now, we also get a DNA analyst who testifies for the prosecution, who actually tested her keys. So this person tested the keys that were found by the gentleman. If we remember, he was walking with his daughter in a stroller and so happened to stumble upon the keys kind of in a ditch at the time. So she testifies, this analyst who analyzed the keys testifies that there were 4 male DNA deposits on the keys. And when she analyzed those 4 DNA profiles against the DNA profile of Quentin, he could not be ruled out as one of those 4 male profiles. Now, of course, you couldn't say 100% if it was his profile, because, you know, you have to isolate each profile to make sure, but she could not say that his profile was not there. Now, the defense's argument on that point was they're friends. She's been in the car with him before, they've been around each other before, and there is no way to say when that actually got deposited on the actual set of keys. So they also call the analyst who analyzed the phones to the stand to talk about the phone pings as well. Now, when he speaks about the phone pings, he can trace both phones being together at the same time, at the same places. He also mentions that there was a small window of time where there was no activity whatsoever on either phone. Now, Quentin's house is, again, right across from the M&M Quick Stop. So on camera, we are able to see that her car actually leaves Quentin's house. Around 7:50, a car returns to the shed on Quentin's property. And we see really shortly after that, the car leaves again. Now, keep in mind that when we're mentioning the shed is where this can of gasoline had been kept on his property. So investigators putting 2 and 2 together, they feel like he pulled up, he did whatever he did when they left at the location where her body was found, or where her car and she was found, should I say. And he came back home real quick, trying to figure out, okay, what am I supposed to do with her? She's dead, thinking that she's dead, or whatever he did to her killed her. So he drives back home, gets the gasoline out of his shed, and then he leaves again, and he is heading in the direction of where the burn site was. Now, when the defense questions the analyst who analyzed the phone pings, the analyst does confirm that, you know, these pings are more accurate when there's more cell towers around to ping off of. When there are less cell towers to ping off of, such as in Cortland, Mississippi, they are a bit less accurate. And he also goes on to mention that there were very many pings from Jessica's phone, but very few pings from Quentin's phone. So in all actuality, he had to admit that while there is pings that have them in the same place at the same time, there are far less pings to make the data more accurate from Quentin's phone than there is for Jessica's phone. So her data of pings is pretty strong, but he didn't have enough information to, you know, be 100% accurate. And then the defense also, of course, when they're talking about this video, they point out, you know, you can't see what car it is that's coming or going from his house across the street from the gas station. You cannot see you can't see the car. You can't clearly see the car. You can't see the license plates. You can't see who's in the car, how many people are in the car. So again, it's not the most helpful information because we can't really verify that was her car or that was a car that he had access to, or, you know, any information of that sort. So the prosecution claimed that Quentin's motive was the fact that he kept getting rebuffed or denied whenever he made sexual advances towards Jessica, and he didn't like being turned down. So prosecutors say that the motive for murdering Jessica for Quentin was that he kept, you know, making advances towards her sexually, and she repeatedly turned him down multiple times on multiple occasions, and he just didn't take too kindly to that. So they thought that he took her wherever he took her, he raped her, and whatever he did to her to hold her down or, you know, get her to comply with whatever he wanted to do with her, he felt that he had killed her in the process, or he had hurt her so badly that she would die anyway. So he thought the best way to get rid of her body, the evidence, the car, was to set it on fire. So he most likely didn't know that she was actually still alive when he set her on fire, but she was. So the foreperson comes out after they have deliberated on the case and says, you know, they had reached a unanimous decision. So when that is said, the judge, you know, asks to verify that, okay, you're sure that you've reached a unanimous decision. And one of the jury members says, I didn't agree with this decision. What? So I guess nobody understood what unanimous meant. It didn't mean like majority rules. It meant everybody has to agree on the verdict that you hand down. So they didn't get that. So they got sent back to deliberate some more so that they could come to a unanimous decision. So they did this a second time, and Madam Foreperson says, we've come to a unanimous decision again. And as that's being said, and they say, you know, they are reading the verdict. And as they say that, you know, he is not guilty, a juror jumps up and said, I voted guilty. What? What? Like, I can understand, I can't understand it, but I can see, you know, the first time not grasping the idea of what unanimous means. But to go to deliberate and to come back and do the same thing all over again is just foolishness. It's foolishness. And then you've already had that impact of reading a not guilty verdict, and that has, I'm sure, impacted every person in that room in a certain way. And then now the judge has to declare a mistrial. So a mistrial was declared, and a second trial took place. Now, the second trial took place in 2018, and they tried him again. And there was a new witness for the prosecution. And the new witness was a burn specialist. And the burn specialist basically came to say that a person with that amount of burns to the body, to the face, to the mouth, there is no way that you can possibly understand what that person is trying to say. It's pretty much impossible for them to speak with that amount of burns, which is 93% burns all over her body. So they were basically saying it's virtually impossible to speak with that in that condition, and it's quite possible that she was in shock, and it's a miracle that she was able to even walk when they arrived on the scene. They also show the autopsy photos that they didn't show in the first trial, and it actually showed bruising on her torso, and it wouldn't have come from just being burned. So they can tell that an assault took place prior to her being burned. So that trial lasted 5 days, And again, the jury could not come to a unanimous decision, and it was a hung jury for a second time. So with that being said, the judge again had no choice but to declare a second mistrial. And it's just crazy. It's just, this case is just pure craziness. So now, you know, after that, we also find out that after his 2018 trial, he gets sent to Louisiana because apparently he has a murder case in Louisiana as well. It was for a young woman named Mandy, and Mandy was found by her apartment manager, and it was because there was a strange smell coming from her apartment. The manager went in to go check on Mandy, and he found her stabbed to death, and she had been there for about 10 days before, you know, being found. So the police investigators come and they, you know, examine her body as well, and they find out that she's been stabbed. She was stabbed 30 times and left for dead. Now, as they're going through, you know, evidence in her house, they find a receipt from a Walmart pharmacy, and they go and check the video for the Walmart pharmacy as well. And lo and behold, they can see her inside the store at the pharmacy. They see her leaving the pharmacy, and they see her getting into a vehicle. And the vehicle that they see her get into is with an African-American man driving, and she hands him the pills that she just got from the pharmacy inside of Walmart, and they drive off. They see that video, and there's plates to be run that they can identify. So they, you know, submit the plates to be run to find out who that car belongs to. And come to find out, the car belongs to Quentin. Quentin Tellis, that is awaiting his third trial for the murder of Jessica Chambers. So they also, you know, check her bank records, and they find that her ATM card had been used. And when they go to check the ATM footage, it's Quentin using the cards. So later on, Quentin has a friend that comes forward as a witness and says that, you know, he confessed that he was using her to get pills, and eventually he just, you know, tortured her to get her bank information, her PIN number for her debit cards, and then he finally murdered her and took everything that she had, pretty much. So that is the case that should be going to trial sometime soon in Louisiana. There is a lot of weight on that trial for the Jessica Chambers trial, because the outcome of the trial for him murdering Mandy would pretty much determine whether or not they move forward with a third trial. I am assuming that if he is found not guilty for the murder of Mandy, he will be tried a third time for the murder of Jessica Chambers. But I think that they are trying to see, you know, if he does get convicted of the murder of Mandy, then they, you know, it's not necessary to move forward with a third trial and, I guess, waste taxpayers' dollars, which I feel like is unfair for the family of Jessica Chambers, because she still deserves justice. I understand that if he gets a long enough life sentence, death, whatever it is, then he'll be locked up anyway. But I still think that I would want a verdict on record saying this was a man who murdered my daughter, my sister, my friend, and I would want the case to be officially, properly closed. But that is it, y'all. That is the story of Jessica Chambers. Her life was ended at the age of 17 way, way too soon. She had big plans. She wanted to be a writer. She wanted to go to college. She wanted to, you know, get a hold of her life, turn her life around, and do better for herself. And unfortunately, her life was taken so frivolously, all because of what sounds like some man's ego for being turned down. So I'm hoping that she gets justice. I'm going to continue to follow the story, because I hope that he gets what he deserves. He being Quentin Tellis. I hope that he gets everything that's coming to him. But that's it. this is also the final look. What do y'all think? I like it. I really, really like it. I tried the Rare Beauty liquid blush and I love it. I love that it's pigmented. It looks really good for my skin tone. But that's it for another Makeup and Murder episode, guys. I hope you really enjoyed this video today. If you did, make sure you like it. Also, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. I told you to do it in the beginning. You should have did it when I told you to. But otherwise, love you guys. Bye.